What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to another live stream here on the Sergeant Tank YouTube channel. Thanks so much for stopping by. We have another special guest live stream with you guys, and that is going to be Josh with Cunningham Cichlids. All of the links and everything down for you guys in the description below. And I even put in chat for you guys. He was generous enough to go ahead and do 10% off his website on your order, utilizing the promo code STL, so like Sergeant Tank Livestream 10, for 10% off. And if you guys enjoy this type of content, I do encourage you, do me a favor, go ahead, hit the subscribe button, put on post notifications so you get all notifications. And without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce Josh. So I'm going to turn the camera over to you, my man, and the floor is all yours. Why don't you go ahead, let anybody know that may not be aware of who you are, just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate you having me on your live stream. So my name's Josh Cunningham. So I run a business called Cunningham Cichlids. I've been breeding African cichlids for well over 20 years now. Started keeping fish back in '96 when I was in the service still. I got into, and actually my first cichlids were not African cichlids. They were Jack Dempsey's and Oscars that I threw in a couple 20-gallon tanks that I later learned that wasn't the right environment for them. So I basically did a no-no and bought fish without doing research. So now I learned a lesson. You do all your research before you go procure your fish is the right way to do it. So ended up getting rid of those, Jack Dempsey's and Oscars. Before I got out of the service, I found what was known to be now a frontosa, the Sinothlopia gibberosa from Lake Tanganyika. So right there, I fell in love with Lake Tanganyikan species. So I knew I had to have those. So then I started doing more research and went down the road of keeping African cichlids. So I started out breeding with about 8 tanks in my other house, pseudo fish room, finished basement type deal. And then we ended up moving, upgrading our house, and I sold everything off and started over. I used to breed fish for a local shop and trade in the fry for filters and food. Used to take them in Ziploc bags. I didn't even know they made fish bags to transport fish. So learned a lot since then, that's for sure.
Right on. So, and I know me being a cichlid guy myself as well, I love cichlids. I mean, I think a lot of us do, especially I see people here in chat. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the process and what got you started doing like an at-home type of business, and kind of what's gotten you in the realm of like, what do you want to say, automation when it comes to a fish room? Can you kind of walk us through, give people kind of a perspective on what your fish room layout looks like currently?
Okay, so like any fish room, one thing you want to do, and I drew up plans originally when I started to put my fish room in. So I have my fish room in my basement. It's a 1,100 square foot fish room. Originally, it was just going to be half of that, so about 550, 600 square foot. But once I started keeping cichlids again, I went on Craigslist. I got the bug, the multiple tank syndrome, we all call it if we're in the hobby, and started just buying tanks after aquariums and set them up in my basement. So once I set up on the right side of my basement, which was originally my fish room was going to be on the left side of my basement. I was going to build the wall, finish it all and everything. I ended up setting tanks on the right side. I decided I'm not going to go through and move all those tanks. I would just make the whole basement my fish room. So currently I have 94 tanks in my fish room. They range from smallest being 15 gallons to the largest being 180 gallon. Originally, I had 140 tanks a year and a half ago when I was really heavy into Lake Tanganyikan cichlids, because you can do a lot of them in small aquariums, as you know, if you keep shell dwellers or Julies. But then I migrated now back into more Haplochromis and more Lake Malawi, Lake Victoria cichlids, where I actually started breeding fish back in '96. So my fish room has been a growing evolution over the last, I think, 6 years now. I've learned a lot over that time period. One thing I preach, and if you've seen my fish room talks, or if you're a local club and I come give you a talk, one thing I preach now is make sure you do your planning up front and make sure you stick to it. I've redone my fish room probably 5 times in the last 6 years, between moving tanks in, taking them out, painting tanks, reconfiguring my room. And I finally just did my final remodel, so my room is pretty much set the way it is. So My next project that's up and coming is to put in an automated water change system on 65 of my tanks that I have set up mainly for grow out tanks and some 40 longs, 40 breeders for breeding. So everything today is all manual water changes. So imagine when I had 140 tanks down there, manually water changing every tank, several tanks a night. It was a 7-night-a-week job. And this is not my full-time job with fish. I also work full-time for a automotive company. So this is what I do on the side as another business that I started up.
Right on. So now when you mentioned as far as with 65 tanks being utilized for more automation, what is your plan with regard to utilizing bulkheads? Can you kind of walk us through like what you plan to do as far as drilling? Are you going to go all in and attempt to do them while the tanks are pretty much in their normal standing, or do you plan on removing them and having them flat so you can kind of drill down rather than, you know, off to the side?
Yeah, so my plan with that is I'm gonna have to actually never drilled a tank before, but I've seen, obviously you watch videos on YouTube, you've seen it done. It doesn't look to be too hard, but my plan is gonna be to empty all those tanks and come down and drill them all. What I put in, I worked with John at Gemco. He was very helpful with helping me and guiding me through what I needed. So considering I'm only drilling 275s and the rest are all 40-gallon and smaller tanks, 40s and 20s and a couple and 10-15s. I went with 3/4-inch bulkhead on, so those will be on the inside, and I'm going to do a 1/2-inch drain hose on the outside. So I'll drill probably 1/2 inch down from the trim and 1/2 inch over, probably on the right side of each tank, and then take them down, empty them, and then drill them and set them back up. I'll put 1.5-inch drain lines in PVC that's going to run all behind my rack. That I'll drill holes in the PVC, and I got grommets from Gemco as well to hook the 1/2-inch hose to the other side so it all drains in the PVC. Now my only concern is to drain all that water down my sump pump, so I'm trying to look at ideas of how do I expel that water out of my basement without using my sump pump. So that's still in the planning stages of how to get rid of it.
Right on. And then with regard to your central air system, can you kind of walk us through maybe a little bit behind the cost? Because I know oftentimes individuals like to know running that size fish room with that many tanks. I already got kind of a sneak peek, and we'll get into that here in a little bit with the shop hop this past Saturday. So I've already kind of seen and kind of know what you plan on doing in the future. But can you kind of walk us through a little bit about kind of costs that go into it and what your recommendation is with regard to the air system?
Okay, yep. So the way my room's filtered is it's all filtered on sponge filters. There is some hang on the back, so I do use some Title 110s on my tanks that are 6 foot or bigger. And I do have sponge filters in there as well. I just feel the Titles actually help with the water movement, and the fish I have in there are bigger fish, so I want to over filter those tanks for them. So my air system, currently I run 2 Alita pumps. I run an Alita AL200, that's my main pump, so that runs over 75% of my room. And then I run an Alita 80 that runs the other 25% of my room. So the way the room is designed is all the pipe is 1 inch. I have bulkheads pretty much installed, so I can cut my system into 10 different pieces if I need to. So I could divert air. I have 3 pump stacks, 3 pump stations. So I have an AL200, which is my main. I have an AL80, and then I have another spot on my fry rack with an AL120 that's not running, but I could run it if I need to. And then I did my system. I divided it with ball valves. So if my AL200 ever went down and I had to rebuild it, I could plug in my AL20s and then switch the ball valves around to do like 50-50 on my room to make sure I could keep all my tanks still filtered while I worked on rebuilding my pump or replacing my pump if something happened. So pumps run anywhere on that size, $500 to $600 from a cost standpoint. And then I probably have spent $1,000 or more on some pumps, but you need that as a backup. If you go buy a pump to run your fish room, you need a backup pump in case something happens, so your tanks aren't without filtration, because you will lose your fish over a day period or a couple days depending on how they're stocked. If you're lightly stocked, you have a little bit more time than if you stock them very heavy, but you want to make sure that you always have a backup pump in case something happens.
Right on. And then now with regard to rack systems, I know my thoughts on this, but I want to see your take on customized rack systems or more manufactured type rack systems. So let's say go to Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, or even order them online. What is your thoughts?
So I know a lot of people do use the manufactured rack systems, as you mentioned, from Lowe's and Home Depot. Personally, for me, I don't like that look for my fish room. And I didn't want a bunch of wood stands as well. I'm not handy in that regards to set up a rack system to cut the wood and do the dado joints and build it and everything like you see on Ted Judy's channel of how to build racks. So I worked with the company we have here in Michigan called Over the Edge. Rick and Brandon up there run the company, and they manufacture angle iron stands. So I had them build me. This is one of my renovations that I went through in my room when I was using two-tier store-bought stands. One thing I ran into a lot of problems with, and if those of you that have them know what I'm talking about, is you can't really get your hands in your bottom tank. If you set up a 55 on top and a 55 on the bottom, your gap between the bottom of the stand and your top trim of your tank is very small, so you can't get things in and out or catch fish very well. So I worked with them. I knew I at least wanted 8 inches between each tank, and so the top of the tank and the bottom of the next shelf or next tier to hold the tank, the next one. So they manufactured me 3-tier stands for my 40 breeders, my 40 longs. They even manufactured me at the time when I had all those tanks some quadruple 20 long stands. So I used those guys to make all my stands for angle iron. I'm very OCD. I want all my stuff to match for the most part. So all my stands in my fish room are made out of angle iron, except my fry racks that I had a guy custom build me wood stands to hold, 15 tanks on each one, and then my one now that has 620 longs had 1810s on it back in the day. So you can go manufactured. I just don't trust them for me. So I feel more safe. I know they're manufactured right. Rick does a great job making tanks or making stands for aquariums. So
right on. And now, can you walk us through a little bit with regard to how your outlets are laid out, power, that type of thing?
Yep. So that was one thing I've made a mistake in with my power. So I have dedicated circuits that run each wall, and they run a certain number of tanks. I run heaters. I have lights that I run down in my fish room. And I know everybody says some of your fish don't need lights, but they're just for us, which is true. But if I'm down in my fish room, spending several hours down there, I like to have my aquarium lights on to observe my fish better. So in regards to lighting with my room, what I wish I would have done is put a dedicated circuit in that I could just run all my aquarium lights on to put on a timer. So then I could turn them on and off with just one switch or one timer, control them that way. But to get around that, I ended up nowadays with technology, I put in Wi-Fi. So I have Wi-Fi plugs that run all my aquarium lights down there. So I use an app on my phone. I can turn my lights on and off on demand or schedule them as needed to turn on and off. I do run heaters in my fish room, in my tanks. So that's one. Another one, if you're putting a room in, you want to plan your heat source so your electric bill doesn't go crazy when you run your heaters, especially in the wintertime when your basement's cold if it's not insulated that great. So my outlets are all behind my tanks. I have, I think, 7 dedicated circuits down there that were put in when I did my fish room. And I also, we just put another circuit in a couple weeks ago. I had a problem where I think my dehumidifier turned on and it flipped my circuit breaker off that ran my main AL200. So I had a guy come in. We ran electrical. I had an extra circuit, so we ran another 20 amp circuit. So now my linear pump is by itself now, so I don't have to worry about the dehumidifier tripping that circuit. So electrical, I wish I would have put it higher, but I can get to all of it if I need to. Behind my racks, it's a little tricky. If I want to get behind it, you pretty much got to take the rack down. So hopefully I don't have any problems back there after I drill my tanks and put the drains behind there to need to get back there to work with it.
Right on. And then kind of tying in with the fish room thing, can you kind of walk us through a little bit with regard to kind of your quarantine process? Do you have like a separate rack system that you utilize for that?
So all my tanks are separate. Nothing's on a central system or anything. So if I get new fish in, they go in a bare bottom tank. So depending on the size and the number that come in, I utilize the various 40 longs or 75-gallon tanks. I have 30 longs and also my 20 highs or 20 longs I can utilize. So if I'm bringing a fish shipment in, which I just brought in last Tuesday, I brought in 100 fish from a wholesaler that I work with. So all the fish go in bare bottom tanks. They get treated right away with API General Cure for the required amount of treatment. I run through 2 treatments on the fish before I will release them for sale to the general public, just to make sure they're eating, they're healthy, and there's nothing wrong with them before I let them go for sale. So I encourage, and I've got burned before. You need to make sure if you're getting fish in, even if you know the person they're coming from, you need to quarantine your fish, because I learned a lesson with that as well. Buddy of mine got me some fish. They looked healthy. They looked okay. And when I added them in with my fish, within a week, I had a parasite outbreak and ended up losing a whole tank of fish. So I never second guess anything. It doesn't matter who it comes from. Not that I don't trust any, the people, your buddies or your friends in the hobby, but I still recommend you quarantine all your fish before they go in your main tanks if you're going to put them with other fish.
Absolutely. I can agree with you more. Now, what got you specifically into dealing with more? I know you talked about this at the beginning. Can you put a little bit more emphasis with regard to kind of more of the African lake type cichlids versus like maybe your South or Central American or New World cichlids? Is there something that kind of led you in that direction, or do you foresee yourself ever branching out and doing any other types of cichlids?
So for me, I know there's this disagreement among the South and Central cichlid keepers and the African cichlid keepers, but to me, the personality in the African cichlids, the color, the variety that they have, always drew me to them. I fell in love when I first found the Frontosa. From that standpoint on, I knew I wanted to keep African cichlids. I don't know that I will probably keep. I like some certain Geophagus species. I'd like to keep some of those in my fish room at one point. I did have some redhead Tapajos, but I never was able to spawn them, so I moved them on to another guy that has them now in a community tank. I do see myself eventually getting more, maybe in the smaller South American cichlids. I don't see myself getting ever into the big central cichlids like your Dovi or your Cynospilums. I don't like to have 2 fish in a tank and you got to divide it and hopefully they pair off, and that doesn't interest me. I know it interests a lot of people, and I'm not knocking that part. Everybody keeps what they like, and that's what's so great about the hobby is there's a lot of diversity in what people can keep and what fish are out there from a cichlid standpoint. But personally, I'll stick to the Africans and probably some of the smaller South American cichlids down the road.
Right on. And then, would any folks just joining us now, can you tell us a little bit about where they can find you? I know at the beginning you mentioned a couple of different things there in regard to where I know that you've done talks. You've done talks with our club, which is the Grand Valley Aquarium Club in the Grand Rapids, Michigan market. How did they get in contact with you for setting something like that up?
So I have a website, www.cunninghamcichlids.com. My email is josh@cunninghamcichlids.com, so you can always send me an email if you wanted to set something up like that. If you're part of a club, I'm also through the American Cichlid Association speaker program, so if you schedule it through the speaker program, your club will get some money back on the costs for me to come out and speak. Through ZoomEd, they run that program. But there's only so many spots, so that has to be set up well in advance to make sure that there's spots available for your club to bring speakers out for that program. Also on YouTube, I have a YouTube channel under Cunningham Cichlids. If you search YouTube, you'll find my channel. My whole drilling, when I drill my tanks, the whole process is going to be documented. So make a mini series on there, so you can find me on there as well. Facebook, I have a Facebook page, Cunningham Cichlids LLC, and I also have a Facebook group that I started that I'm running auctions and raffles through under Cunningham Cichlids.
Right on. And then what got you started on YouTube? Was it just kind of following the trend? Was it like, hey, I want to get myself out there from a marketing standpoint? Like, how long have you been on YouTube?
So my first original videos on YouTube went out back in like 2012. I made some videos on just some of my aquariums that I had, some early fish room tours. For me, YouTube was a place to store my videos that I was making, to go back and reference as my room grew, as it went through the evolutions. there was a place to store and capture my videos that I can go back and watch instead of using your space on your local PC, or if your PC crashed, you lose all the footage that you've made or that you've taken. Was never really into it the way I am now. I'm not that great in front of the camera sometimes, so I'm a little shy, a little bit more introverted when it comes to that. But trying to get myself out there and share, as I've been breeding fish for 20 years, so I have some knowledge I'm trying to share, trying to help new hobbyists or get new ideas on how to set up fish rooms. Like I said, I want to, I'll show how I drill tanks, and maybe that'll help somebody else down the road. Just some things I did. Made a video on how to ship fish, because I've been shipping fish for well over 5 years. So just more informational type messages and videos now to help out anybody out that needs them.
Sure. And then I know for me, again, it's one of my greatest passions, is anybody that's been following me long enough, is with regard to actually shipping of livestock. And I know I've been doing it for about 10 years now, but I want to know your perspective. What got you kind of transition over to shipping? What got you comfortable in the process? Can you kind of walk us through? They've heard my side of it. I kind of want to get somebody else's perspective on, some testing methods and what got you comfortable to kind of jump on that bandwagon and start shipping.
Okay. Well, for me, if you breed fish, your local market's only so big for aquarium fish. So eventually, and if you keep allowance or some, fish that give you very large broods and you end up raising them all, you're going to get overrun at some point with the price. So either you make a decision, either you give them away to people that want them, you could donate them to clubs. As far as that goes, or you can sell them, sell them to other hobbies. But again, you're going to saturate the market locally. So eventually everybody's going to have that fish that you're working with. So to me, shipping fish was a method to get them out and more widely spread across the U.S. Originally, I shipped a lot of UPS or USPS packages when I first started, because I was working with Malawans. Smaller fry, nobody's going to pay, or you don't want to pay, $48, $50 a box to get a box at the airport for 6 fry. So I started looking at the shipping methods. I know it probably sounds cruel, but when I first started, I put a fish in a bag and I let it sit for 3 or 4 days, and I checked on it to make sure to see how long it would last in the bag. And I think I got around 5 days that fish was fine in the bag. So I ended up letting it go in the tank with no problem. All my fish are packed on O2, so I started researching how do you pack them in oxygen, what chemicals do you put in the bag, what's the whole fasting process. So for me to ship, I'll fast my fish at least 2 days before I send them to you. I do a water change at least the night before, if not the day before as well. Usually the night before, because I'll fast them, let them clean their systems out, and then I'll do a water change the night before I pack them. I pack them all on oxygen, no matter what. Even if you're a local customer, you come pick up my fish. If you're going 20 minutes down the road, I just pack them on air. That's just what I do. So especially if you're not going right home. I know they'll last longer. I know a lot of guys that ship without using oxygen, and the fish are fine. That's just my preference, is to use oxygen to ship, just to guarantee or try to help them, survive, and the customer at the other end be happy with what they receive. I also use a couple chemicals when I ship. So I was using Ship Shape, which they're not making that anymore. I still have some left that I'm using. But I transitioned over as well to use some cordon products. So I use Amquil, and I also use Fish Protector when I ship fish. And depending on the fish size of them, I'll also use some methylene blue as well. So I was shipping a lot of USPS packages with Malawans and Tanganyika, or Victorians. When I went primarily in the Tanganyika market, I switched over and started pretty much shipping all air cargo. So I can ship as Delta or Southwest as well, depending on what size order you place and where you're at. If you want your fish to arrive in that method. But now that I'm back to Malawans and Victorians, I'm finding people would prefer it shipped to their door. They don't want to go to the airport to pick up, like I said, 6 or 8 fry. So I started shipping back with the USPS again, and that's been pretty successful.
Right on. So it's bringing us up here to the 30-minute mark, you guys. And anybody that's been following me for any period of time with doing any type of collaboration live streams knows that we will get to your guys' questions. I have some questions queued up here that we'll definitely get to. So please continue. You have plenty of time. Continue to get those questions in. This is your time and opportunity to ask Josh if you have any questions. So anybody just coming in here, thank you so much again. All the links and so forth will be down for you guys in the description below. You can utilize STL 10 for 10% off over at Cunningham Cichlids. So definitely check that out after we're done here and see what availability you may have. And I know that there's foods and besides just livestock, so definitely check it out. But yeah, so anything else with regard to kind of what we're talking about, maybe that just came to your mind that you would like to share kind of with the fish room build? If not, I guess my last question with that would be, what is your recommendation if you could give one tip to somebody that's had a few tanks and now want to transition into building a fish room, whether that's in a barn, if that's in a garage, wherever it might be? Is there like one tip that you could give that get them pointed in the right direction?
So one tip I would say would be, I can't stress it enough, would be to plan out your room. Plan out where you want your electrical, what your heat source is going to be, if you're going to heat the room, what you're going to do for water changes, if you're going to do them manually or if you're going to go the automated way. It's a lot easier to slow down and take the time up front to plan all these things than to jump in feet first and then go back, as I did, 4 or 5 times, redoing my pulling tanks down, putting them on triple stands, pulling them down to paint them because I figured I'd like the painted look better, but I had 30 tanks up before I even painted them. So I went through emptying tanks and painting them. So the biggest thing would be to plan it and just take your time. I mean, the hobby's going to be around for many, many years. So if you plan it right, you're going to enjoy it a lot better than, not that I don't enjoy it, but it's a lot of work when you have to go through. And now I'm, going through the process of automating it. I'm going to be drilling my tanks. I could have done that in the beginning, but I wouldn't have to take them down and move fish out of them and go through the whole process of that again. So biggest thing is just plan and take your time and do it the way what makes you happy, but just take your time with it so you don't have to redo things.
Right on. All right, so let's get to a few of the questions here, you guys. So I'm kind of going back to the top of the chat, so please continue to bring those questions in, either for myself, but even more so for Josh, as that's why we're here doing a live stream. So you guys can talk to me anytime. This is your opportunity to be able to pick his brain with his wealth of knowledge in the hobby. So the first question that I had here was, what is your recommendation when it comes to not just keeping, but maybe breeding? Touch a little bit about Jack Dempsey's, maybe a little bit as far as setup, tank size, if you don't mind sharing that with everybody.
So if you're going to decide to breed a fish, one thing I've always stressed is, one, do your research. Make sure you look at the minimum tank requirements that fish needs, and make sure you can at least accommodate the minimum tank requirements, and also go bigger if you can, because the more room you can give them, the better off they'll be. I never read Jack Dempsey's. I know they're egg layers. They pair off, and once your pair's formed, they'll spawn as far as that goes. I know they're aggressive, so make sure you give them cover and do a lot of research on a biotope tank and set it up, as naturally as you can to make them happy and make them thrive in that environment.
Right on. So, and then I want to know your take with regard, another question that came in here was with regard to aggression between African cichlids and South or Central American cichlids.
So I think it depends on the type of cichlids. African cichlids, so I've kept some. If you look at Lake Victorian cichlids, for example, they get a bad rap. They're ultra aggressive. They kill each other. I'll never keep them, but there's certain species within Lake Victoria that are aggressive, more aggressive than others. If you look at your Neochrobus green woodeye, if you've ever kept them, they're probably, when I kept them back in the probably 4 years ago, they were probably the most aggressive Victorian I've ever kept. But then you look at the Haplochromos theriterian that we have in the hobby today, those aren't aggressive at all. The males don't bother each other. You can have multiple males in a tank. When breeding, they might flare up at one another, but there's no damage done to any fins compared to the green woodeye would just thrash each other left and right. I know Central Americans are very aggressive. I'm sure they're a lot more aggressive than some of the African cichlids. So you got to make sure you set up your aquarium the right way, the way they need it, so you can try and manage that aggression. And make sure you put the right combination of fish together. So one thing with breeding fish for me, I run mainly species-only tanks. I don't want to mix up fish or cause any accidents of them hybridizing together. I'm very against hybrids. We have a lot of natural pure fish in the hobbies that we can pick from today. as it is. So I make sure my tanks are set up so that there's no risk of that happening.
And then tying in with that, another question here. What is your thoughts? I think you kind of touched on a little bit there, but mixing between the two Africans with South American cichlids.
So I know a lot of people do it, but I don't agree with tank setups that way. I don't think the fish are that happy in that environment. They're going to live, they're going to eat. You're going to think they're happy, but deep down, I don't believe they're that happy in that environment. I think they should be set up in the right conditions that each fish needs based on the origin of where they come from. Whether it's South America and they need a lower pH. If you keep African cichlids, you need a higher pH. Yes, you can find your balance maybe in the middle, and they'll both thrive or live in that environment. But to get them really to thrive, you need to set up your tanks the right way and give them the right water chemistry and even the right diet that you need. I know some people throw trophies into their African cichlid tanks. Well, trophies are herbivores. A lot of your African cichlids from Lake Malawi are carnivores. There are some herbivores and omnivores, but make sure your tanks are set up the right way for the right diets so your fish can thrive and you can really enjoy them if they do.
And then what is your recommended? There wasn't a lot of detail behind this, but give us kind of your recommendation on a more inexpensive pump. It doesn't sound to me as far as if you guys want to clarify this question, I'm trying to find it here, but it had to do with recommended pump for a cichlid tank. But there wasn't too much information as far as, is that multiple tanks? Is it one tank? I know my take on just, smaller type of, not a central type pump, but do you have like a go-to pump for like a single tank?
Yeah, so before I had my central air system in, a lot of pumps I would use would be a Whisper 100 made by Tetra, or now I'm using some Aqueon 100s. I really like their new design that they came out with on their pump. So if you're going to run smaller tanks, just want to run air stones or want to run sponge filters and one-off tanks, I would look at Whisper 100s. They have dual outlets, and same thing with the Aqueon 100s. They have dual outlets as well, so you can run a couple different things off them.
What is your recommendation in order to raise a pH in a tank?
So I would recommend buffering them. That's one thing I don't do. I don't mess with my pH in my tanks. My water comes out about 7.6 out of the tap. So you can buy buffers depending on what lake your fish come from. They make Lake Seachem makes Lake Malawi buffer or Lake Tanganyika buffer that you can use in your tanks if those are the fish you're keeping to raise the pH and for those species. You can also make some homemade buffers. I'm not too familiar with that. I know a lot of people use baking soda and an Epsom salt mix, I believe, and that together can buffer your water and help raise your pH as well.
Sure. My recommendation, as I've shared with you guys, especially being here in Michigan, just from keeping many different types of anywhere from Livebearers all the way up to various cichlids and breeding many different ones, is 1 pound of crushed coral per 10 gallons of water. And again, that comes and goes. I find between 18 and 21 days, it will balance itself out so you can maintain the appropriate pH levels that you're looking for. And again, my water chemistry being here in Michigan, he's more off to the east of the state with regard to where I'm at. But based on what he was just indicating as far as coming out of the tap, I would imagine if I tested both of our waters, they'd be very close in proximity to one another. But keep in mind when you're talking about buffers, and as Josh was just making note of, because I know with the Carib Sea you can get like a mixed cichlid type of substrate, which sometimes comes in black, white. It almost looks like a really fine sand. I know that that's also a buffer that you can use. Now, I'm not being paid for by to say that. It's one I've used before in the past. However, for me, if I'm keeping even a bare bottom tank, I might just add some crushed coral in the bottom. I may mix it in with some substrate. It just kind of depends. There's a lot of variables I know that go in with regard to buffering. The main thing to me is consistency rather than trying to tweak a lot of the parameters, because keep in mind when you start to buffer, as you guys know, I'm a numbers guy. You start playing with not only your general hardness, but your bicarbonates or your KH level and your carbonate hardness. So I think it just kind of depends on, again, locality, what type of cichlids you're keeping, whether if that be South, Central American cichlids, African cichlids. A lot of us, I know for me, I do more conditional type breeding where I acclimatize them. a lot of the stuff I breed in order to make it a little bit more adapting if it's sent to you guys. And that's what I appreciate about his setup as well, is not tweaking a lot of stuff, just kind of maintaining what's available at hand. And I know from me, I couldn't agree more. Again, I know everybody kind of has their own take on it, but I think consistency is the key thing. Does that feel accurate with you?
Yes, very, very much. Yes, I totally agree with that.
All right. So another question here was we will get Craig to your question here in just a couple of minutes. So I have not forgot about that. Just trying to find. Somebody's wondering if you breed any guppies.
No, I don't, but I did actually have guppies in my fish room and some cherry red shrimp up to about a year ago. I had some in a 15-gallon tank just to dabble with them for a little bit.
Right on. All right. So 2 questions that we'll just kind of tie into one here. Do you keep anything other than cichlids? And I guess I'll even add something else. Any other pets besides fish? And then anything more. People know my pet peeve, and I don't know what your take is on this, but I always kind of have like a little mini rant when people refer to something as rare. I think rare to me is one thing, but I think maybe it would be more appropriate to say not as common to be found depending on what market you're in and if you're looking for a specific fish, if that makes sense. But do you keep anything quote unquote rare or falling in that category, and then anything other than cichlids, any other pets?
So as far as other pets, we do have a dog that goes back and forth between where my daughter's at. She's with my ex-wife for here. Little 5-pound Maltese that goes back and forth. So that's my only other pet besides cichlids. I do have a couple betta fish as well. So mainly cichlids, and then I keep some variety of your bushy nose plecos, your calicos, your super reds, your albinos that I was breeding a while back. So I have offspring sprinkled in different things from those guys.
Right on. And then go ahead.
I would say, as far as your question, as far as rare, I agree with your take on that. And also, rare, what's rare to me, everybody has their own opinion on it, but I would say some fish that are uncommon in the hobby that I have right now are considered Lithernot, Turney, Harbor Island. Those just recently came in from Germany. So they're sprinkled through a few. There's 4 or 5 breeders that I know that have them. I'm one with a group of them now. Another rare fish or uncommon fish that I have in the hobby that I think there's only another guy in the U.S. that's breeding them are some Placidochromis gold Mabamba Bay. So I do have some groups that are very isolated to select breeders right now.
Right on. And then let's see here. All right, somebody was breeding some Neolamprologus. I'm trying to find what species that was here. But they were just, if I remember the question right, I'm trying to find it here, was regard to pulling the fry. What is the recommendation for them?
So it depends on the Neolamp, depends on which species you're talking about. If you're talking about Neolamprologus bouchardi, I never pulled the fry when I was breeding them in a 30 long. The neat thing about a bouchardi is to watch them colonize, to watch them their natural behavior, their natural instinct. Because once they pair off, they have fry. The fry are going to grow up, obviously. Then they're going to spawn again. So the offspring from the first batch of fry will actually protect and help raise the offspring of the second batch. So if you're pulling fry from your tank all the time, you'll never get to see that natural instinct in the way they colonize in an aquarium. But you also got to look at if you're breeding Neolamprologus nilupi. When I bred my group, they would always eat their fry. So I gave them three tries. And if they wouldn't raise their own fry, then I went in there, and once I was able to see that they hatched, I was able to pull them out with turkey basters and then artificially raise them myself. So it depends on which Neolamprologus you're referring to. I've had different experiences with different ones. Neolamprologus boucheri, same thing. I could raise 3 spawns in the tank, and then I had to get the group out because they wouldn't spawn again, and the parents would get pretty aggressive towards the offspring.
Right on. And then now let me find here. What is your thoughts with individuals putting a betta in with other fish?
I guess I have them all singly. I guess I know they can go with other fish if they're with the other right fish. I believe I'm not too familiar on mixing that species, to be honest. I've always kept them by themselves in 4-gallon bio tanks to enjoy them. But I'm sure you can mix them with like tetras or barbs, anything that's not too aggressive, given the right amount of space as well. You don't want to cram a betta in a 4-gallon tank with a bunch of neon tetras. That's not the right environment for them or enough space for them.
Right on. And then I'm trying to find here. All right. So Craig's question. Let me pull that up here. All right. So looks like he's doing some transitioning from moving my room from basement to the garage. Blown insulation is complete for the walls. Could we provide a little bit of insight behind insulating the garage door and concrete floors? So do you have any thoughts on with that regard?
So as far as insulation, that's one thing I didn't do in my room. It's not insulated. I did use a lot of green board to go up on the concrete walls. Whatever you put up, a fish room is going to let off a lot of humidity. You're going to have a lot of moisture down there. So you need to make sure your insulation is mold proof, because you don't want to start growing mold that will rot your house from the inside out no matter what. So you want to make sure you can control that. I know some people do insulate their garage doors. I believe can't think of the name, but I know there's insulation at Lowe's that they make that I'm going to look at putting in my ceiling that's mold proof. It will never grow mold. It is very expensive, but it will also protect your house when it comes to that case. Because my humidity in my basement right now, it's probably 45, 48%, somewhere in there. But with over 5,000 gallons of water, it can get out of control if you don't have dehumidifiers. And I actually run 2 dehumidifiers, and now I run an air exchanger as well to try and control the humidity down there.
Right on.
Just make sure whatever you put on your walls, you're thinking of the moisture content so you don't grow mold.
Sure. And then just kind of tying in, because if you guys, and I know a lot of you guys in here, I've talked about that before, is my background was in construction before my disability back in 2011. So there's other factors that go into it. Specifically, I did concrete work by trade. I did flat work for a lot of years. But there's things that can be done. If you want to reach out to me, Craig, I'm more than happy to go a little bit more into detail via email on what my recommendation would be, because I want to know a little bit more information as far as specifically insulation overhead. So I would need to know kind of the design layout of your garage. I think that's what you said, garage, if I remember right, that you're moving everything to, because the main thing is, besides insulation, is the appropriate air exchange that you're looking for, because there's cold zones that you need to have, especially if it's like a garage, and then let's say you have like an attic space or something up there. So yeah, it can get a bit tricky, but I agree with everything that Josh is mentioning with regard to a lot of mold resistant type of materials. Don't go cheap, especially when it comes to insulation. And if you plan on finishing it off, just make sure that you put the investment there, because you're not going to want to go back and end up, changing that later on. I know for me, I run 3 different fish rooms, and in our biggest fish room, that one I run a 30,000 BTU gas, because it's much cheaper here in Michigan versus run electricity. So I picked that up at Tractor Supply Company, and it will heat not only that, but our entire all the other fish rooms as well. So I keep fans moving. I have a dehumidifier, which I utilize more in the summer. Because the moisture in that, I don't keep a lot of my tanks covered for various reasons, which I'm not going to go into. So I'm more than happy to try to offer some guidance. If you start going too much into construction and you really plan on putting a lot of investment in it, I always have to advise, make sure that your code requirements and everything are up to par, and make sure you're following what your ordinances allow. Because the last thing you want is the city coming and knocking at your door, and somebody finds out that you're doing type of addition or something like that, and now you don't have the appropriate permitting. You can really be opening yourself up to a can of worms there. So I think that was about it with the questions that I had written down. So please, you guys, the last few minutes here, we'll be going for about another 12 minutes. Continue to bring those questions in. Anybody just hopping in here, we have Josh with Cunningham Cichlids. He's about 2.5 hours from me, which is pretty cool. I had an opportunity this past Saturday. We had a shop hop. I'm not going to go into clubs. You can check out the videos, multiple videos I've talked about with regard to the importance of joining aquarium clubs. That may be a question here in just a minute. I'll probably actually want a little bit of your feedback with regard to clubs, because I know that you've been around in this game longer than me. So I kind of want your take with regard to a little bit with the importance of aquarium clubs. Yeah, so we had an opportunity to visit his fish room. He was nice enough to let us in, and he was also nice enough to allow for 10%. I want to say for 2 weeks, if that's correct.
Yes.
Yep. So 2 weeks for you guys. So plenty of time. 10% off your entire order over at Cunningham Cichlids. And again, all the information is down for you guys in the description. And I will be adding for you guys, once this is concluded, any other links in order to get in contact with Josh. So let me pull back up chat. Do you have a Placo, a favorite Placo, Josh? That was another question there.
My favorite one I would have to say would be the gold nugget.
Right on.
So I made a mistake and tried to put them with my African cichlids, and it did not work very well for the Placo. So again, make sure you're putting your fish with the right environment. That was early on in my days, but I gotta say that's my favorite one.
Sure. And then can you touch a little bit in regard to the importance of clubs? I know obviously you're a big fan of clubs, and I know that you go to a lot of them.
So yeah, so clubs are very important to keep around or to participate in for the hobby. Right now I'm a member of, I think, 5 or 6 clubs. Sometimes I lose track. But I was on the board for a couple of years of the Ohio Cichlid Association. I was on the board for 4 years of the Michigan Cichlid Association. I was president for 3 years with that club, and I just finished up being president after this past year. So now I'm also on the board of the American Cichlid Association. So clubs are very important. They're very educational. It's also a chance for hobbyists to get to meet other hobbyists and share information. I know we can, with the web and Facebook, we can do that all over the internet, but a club brings a different perspective. You can meet somebody face to face and really get to know them and be very personable from that standpoint. And there's a lot of great people in clubs. There's a lot of good programs if you participate in a club, like Breeders Award programs. So I'm a big proponent of participating in the Breeder Award programs. I'm a chief master breeder in the Ohio Cichlid Association and the Michigan Cichlid Association, and was the grand champion breeder in the American Cichlid Association with the competition they do back in 2015. So if you have a club and you have a Breeders Award program, please participate. It allows other hobbyists to get a hold of your fry. It gives them a chance to work with fish that they might not have the opportunity to otherwise. Also creates a little bit of competition between some of the breeders. A lot of clubs also do CARES programs. So Michigan this year just got a CARES program going. So CARES is an organization that works to protect the fish that are endangered in the international environment that we might only have in the hobby. So like Victorian cichlids, for example, a lot of them are endangered in the lake. So some of those species, the only population we have of that fish is what's in the hobby and what's with other breeders that they're working with. So a lot of programs a lot of clubs also help you get educated on CARES and help you participate in that program as well. So they're very important from an educational standpoint. I can't stress that enough. Also, clubs will bring in speakers from different months. So it's your chance to learn from another aquarist, depending on what the topic is, whether it be, with Michigan, we brought in Mike Drawdy on fish farming, and we brought in Greg Steves on Lake Victorian cichlids. I know you guys in Grand Valley have brought in some Lawrence Kent on Lake Victorian cichlids and some other really good speakers. So it's your chance to, for what it costs, $10 or $15, depending on the club to join. It's well worth it, and you get your money back based on education and just the camaraderie of meeting other hobbyists.
I couldn't agree more. I always put it in this way: for the cost of a movie ticket, literally cheaper than the movie ticket, oftentimes with most clubs, for your entire family for a whole year. It's unbeatable, and let alone all of the relationships that you build. If it wasn't for my local club and this community and the hobby in general, I wouldn't be to where I'm at. You know, it's definitely a great opportunity to meet, to be engaged, as he was talking about the importance. We've had a lot of phenomenal speakers. If you guys can probably think of one person from a veteran aquarist point of view, chances are at one point or another, our club basically, and I've talked about this a little bit, was 95. It was basically originated, and it was kind of more or less, I look at the SWAMIS, or Southwestern Michigan Aquarium Society, branch off from back in the 70s. And then members from there went ahead and decided to originate GVAC, which I'm very happy about. And I'm very fortunate to be a part, not only to be on the board, but also to be a part of an awesome club that really brings in phenomenal speakers. And speaking of Lawrence Kent, actually I have some of his Statocranus irvini, which I've already bapped and bred. They're one of my favorite, and I guess from a rarity point of view, you know, I don't like to use that, but they're not one that you oftentimes find. And I have been hoarding them, but I might have to let a few go with our big auction that's coming up here in GVAC and the end of this month. So I would like to start passing them along, I guess. But yeah, I have quite a few going. They're just a really neat species, and it's hard for me to that's one that's hard for me to really pass along.
we all have one of those, that's for sure.
Yep. All right. So I think that does it with the questions, guys. A couple of more questions here, and we'll go ahead and wrap everything up. Again, all the information will be down for you guys in the description. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I always enjoy these type of collaborations. Let's see here. Just want to make sure I'm not missing you guys' questions. All right, so somebody is wondering, have you ever owned a python cichlid from Lake Victoria?
A python cichlid? No, I can't say I have. I've never heard of a python cichlid from Lake Victoria.
I would have to agree. I know that there's oftentimes common names that are put on things, and that's not one that I'm particularly familiar with. Let's see here. Well, that looks like it's, yeah, I think that does it with the questions. So we'll just kind of wrap things up here, you guys. And I'll just kind of let you close things out, Josh, if you just want to put, kind of reiterate and just let people know, anybody that joined us kind of later in the live stream, kind of where they can find you, and any last closing words that you'd like to share.
Okay, thanks. So, yeah, I can be found on my website's CunninghamCichlids.com. I also have Facebook, Cunningham Cichlids LLC. I have a Facebook group under Cunningham Cichlids. I'm on Instagram. My email is josh@CunninghamCichlids.com. So if you have questions, I'll be happy to help you if you send me an email, or you can message me through my business page. If you have questions on keeping cichlids or where to find fish, I have no problem. One of my big rules in business, if I don't have the fish that you're looking for, I will work with you to try and find it, even if that's pushing you to another business or another breeder. I have no problem networking and sending people around to other hobbyists or other businesses to acquire what they're looking for. So if you're looking for hard to find species, or you just don't know where, like Madoka whitelips, for example, some people ask, do you have any? No, I have a group, but I'll tell them where they can find some other hobbyists that have them, that are working with them and are breeding them. So I have no problem doing that. So if you have questions, you're looking for stuff, hit me up. I try to respond as fast as I can. But again, I do have a day job, so keeping fish at night is another job, business that I run, but it's, my day job comes first. So just keep that in mind. If you message me during the day and I don't respond right away, I will get to it, but I do work, a normal job.
Right on. Well, thanks so much, Josh, for hopping on here. Thank you, everybody, all the moderators and so forth. Definitely check out the link again, STL10 for 10% off over at Cunningham Cichlids. And you guys know what's next. As always, stay encouraged. Keep on keeping on. Happy fishing. We'll talk to you guys right back here on the next one.